every single thing on every page. But one of the things that we're concerned about is with the amount of energy and conversation in the room, that it may have been difficult for some of the recorders to pick up all of the conversation. And so the chancellor is our designated photographer, and he is recording all of the images. So we'll have a visual, if not audio, document.
We'll get a much better record.
Okay, we will do that. And so what I'd like to do is ask the reporter or whoever the designated person is at each of your tables to spend 4 or 5 minutes describing the highlights of your conversation. And to be innovative, we're going to start with the innovation group. And Deborah, if you would be willing to speak into this.
Okay, so as you can see, we have, is the mic not on? Oh, there. I've got my own mic. Okay, so as you can see, we have, I don't know if I just write big. I'm also the writer. So we answered the questions according to our facilitator, one by one. So the first question was, why is innovation important? And you can see we covered it. We felt because we have to, with today's students, they're more diverse, the millennials, it's how they learn. We want to keep the curriculum relevant, embracing change, stay ahead of the curve, changing world, global. I mean, it's important, because we say it is. No, it's important. And you'll also see this kind of overlaps this question with number 5, too, about what should the message points be about innovation. And then we discussed what falls under innovation, and it covers quite a bit. We felt, you can see up here, I don't have to read everything, technology, jobs, careers, teaching, pedagogy, revenue streams, student services, business practices, affordability. This all is areas that we feel it's very, it all follows back to important to be innovative about. And does innovation include all campuses? And the answer is yes, of course. Each campus will implement as appropriate, and innovation will recognize a campus's mission, and while keeping, you know, that's the strength of our system, the diversity of our campus. And so of course, innovation would include all campuses. And does innovation speak? How does innovation speak to the internal and external audiences? Internally, we included alumni. We had a little bit of a discussion about that. Are they internal, external, parents, students? It will speak to students, faculty, staff, all about the success. And also it can speak to attracting, retaining, graduation rates. And externally, yes, it does speak to that too as well. As far as funding, speaking to elected officials, employers, branding, and public support is all part of that. And once again, number 5, what should the message points about innovation be? And it goes back to why it's important, of course, but it should be efficiency, quality, accountability, preparing students for the future, for the public good, the economy, the quality of life, applied research. We'll go on and on. And then our facilitator, Lisa, asked us to add some examples. We wanted extra credit. Examples of innovation. So we came up with some examples. I'm sure everybody can think of even more, but technology for advising, online degree completion, and completion of online degrees and courses, and intellectual properties, tech transfer, degree programs, library services, course delivery. Feel free to add anything if you wish. Or any. So, yes. This was presented by President Nelson. Could you explain?
Tech transfer is when you take...
Oh, here.
Tech transfer is when you create a product that you can sell at the university. Maybe it's a patent that you're going to do, maybe it's some new invention that you've done, but really taking the applied research that we do and make it into a product so that we can have a new revenue stream.
our group like to add anything to? No? All right. Any more questions? All right. Da-da-da. I'm the messenger.
Thank you. And actually, we're going to work our way around the room. So who is the reporter for the student table?
Thank you. So we have the touchstone of students, and the importance is clearly that they are the reason that we exist, and they're our next generation of leaders. When we talk about who we're talking about when we say students, we really are taking a broad view of that, the whole K-20 continuum, as well as our alumni. When we talk about what falls under the touchstone of students, we talked about teaching and learning, student life, research, fundraising, really the heartbeat of the every aspect of the university, campus site location. We talked some about external audiences, and both for external audiences and internal audiences, we thought that some may see students as just those who are currently enrolled, as opposed to our broader definition of that K-20 continuum and alumni. And so we would have to work on that message to embrace our future, present, and past students. We thought that some external audience may just see this touchstone as something that had to do with teaching and learning, as opposed to the broader mission of the university. Certainly funders respond well to this touchstone of students. Scholarships are always the easiest dollars to raise. Employers view our students as a potential workforce, and our student athletic programs often are what is the external view of the university, building its reputation and such. We talked about internal audiences, the impact of our students on industry, and how much time internally we think about the industry connections with our students, and that everybody in the university is responsible for students. And we had some conversation about what if every job description made the connection to say, how does this role impact students? We had quite a bit of conversation around in this environment where where resources are replenishing themselves as our tax receipts go up and we recover from the Great Recession, that there's a lot of competition over resources, and that touchstone of is it student-centered becomes a way that we can make fiscal priorities in an environment of competing priorities. And so we might see a lot of focus of our resources on student support. And finally, the message points for our touchstone, I think I'll zero in on this second one, that through our students we transform the lives of individuals, families, and communities. Does anybody from our table want to add anything? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, who is the reporter for the Public Good and Service Touchstone? All right, you were the facilitator too.
Yes. We had a really kind of an interesting discussion on public good and service. And many of these things are quite familiar to many on campus. Why is this important? Certainly our mission, our vision, our sense of accountability is always measured because our investor and the beneficiary of our work. Many of us have used the line that we are the creators and holders of talent that drives California. And so if you think of 450,000 students, graduates, 20 across the country, et cetera, working here in the ninth largest economy impact of the CSU is very, very dramatic, particularly in terms of the talent that we create. So we got to thinking big about the USA and the world. Promotes democracy, transform lives. We talked about a lot of things about what it means to serve the public good, from events to volunteerism, internships, civic engagement. We had a good discussion about how we are promoters of democracies. I thought that was an engaging. Connections to business and research, to pre-K 14. Really do believe that the CSU is a catalyst for social change, given the power and scope and the values of our students. And then critical skills, et cetera. And then we had an even better discussion about what is something all of us should be doing versus individual campuses. But then we realized that we all live in a different and work in a different context, from rural to urban, the classic Northern California, Southern Cal kind of thing. But we just have different contexts. We draw different students. There's a wonderful blending and mixing of the citizen campuses. So we talked about the room for unique contributions, but we should face up as a system to some big issues. Violence, homelessness, hunger, the slate of gun violence, for example, particularly on campuses, incredibly dramatic. I was listening. I think most of the presidents here can tell a story of students being injured or shot somehow by weapons, either on or near campus. Well, those are the big issues that we were starting to talk about. We had a great discussion on much more cross-campus opportunities, teaming up where appropriate, et cetera. How do we leverage the scale of things? And then we got into some message points, and we have talked about the return on investment. We thought we could get much better at that from a lot of different ways, not just in dollars, but in personal satisfaction, community improvement, working with legislators, the fact that we are the talent engine of the state, and that we are producing, I know might be taken as a pejorative, but we do produce better citizens, right? Our students think through things. We just need to get them to vote more than they do. But we do provide, each of our campuses does provide a community boost in terms of employment, economic success, arts, quality of life issues. All of us entertain non-university people on our campuses, the public, every day, 24/7. I mean, they're always in our libraries, et cetera. We could do a better job of leveraging the human capital. We transform lives. The one I wanted to get to, because I think it's something that we should, I don't know, maybe it's a personal thing I've been working on, but our students travel a longer, tougher road to their diploma than I think any other student body in the country, right? If you get accepted to Carnegie Mellon, the odds are you're going to do pretty well. And if you're going to go to the top tier schools, you are. We have students that we've never really looked at the path they've taken. Dropping in, dropping out, sticking to something, their effort, their persistence, the challenges they face from unemployment, violence, their neighborhoods, their economic situations, and how they array all of that energy over time. And at the table, we were sort of alluding to the fact that if we thought of our students that way, we'd get away from thinking about a 4-year trap, right? You become a better person in 4 years. Well, we know that doesn't happen. We know that we want them to get their degrees quickly, but the quality and the energy, the uniqueness of our students, we need to think about them differently than with more traditional metrics. So that was our.
Thank you. Any other comments from the table? Thank you so much, Les.
We actually thought of it as being public good because we talked about what I think at the other table, that when we have a first generation graduate, suddenly a cousin goes to school, suddenly another member of the family, grandma goes to school, and so that it cascades, yeah. And we don't do enough research on that either to know what that impact is.
What I really appreciate about this is it gives us a much richer definition of student success than boiling it down to 4- and 6-year graduation rates. That there are a lot of definitions of student success, and this captures some of those that I think are really important. They're tougher to measure, but they're really critical in the lives of our students.
Basically, the private good impact is more linear, but the public good impact is more exponential.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Our touchstone on quality.
Thank you, Lisa. Our touchstone, as Lisa said, is on quality. And of course, quality touches on everything that has been said already and those that are yet to be reported. From the standpoint of our group, quality is necessary for achievement of the university's mission. If we don't have quality, we can't expect to have any real impact. So that quality must be present in terms of supporting student success, supporting faculty and staff success, in developing excellent academic and co-curricular programs that support students, also that support the state, and that quality also carries with it the expectation that there will be metrics that will be used and data to drive decision making to increase excellence. We said that quality is also important in terms of the recruitment of faculty, staff, and students as we engage all of them in the university. The second question is what falls under this? And for us, as we talked about quality, we talked about the quality of academic programs, facilities, the quality of the engaged learning experiences of students, including making sure that the campus uses high-impact practices as part of their work with students. Again, the importance of faculty and staff as research supervisors, as teachers, as mentors, role models, etc. Also, we talked about the importance of campus climate and environment. We talked about the importance of governance and transparency. And finally, in that area, we talked about accountability. To the third item, does this include all campuses? We had an easy yes to that, as everybody does. But we added a caveat here based on something that Jeff Armstrong said, which is, but one size does not fit all. Is that right, Jeff? Next, as we respond to the question of does it speak to our internal and external audiences, our response to that was yes. It was mentioned, however, that that we have not come as far as we need to come because of misperceptions embedded in the master plan for higher education in California, which of course dates back to 1960. And the question is that still relevant? Our general sense is no, but at the same time, there's a sense that there is a perception across the state that it is still in place, and that it suggests that somehow the UC is better than the CSU, et cetera. And so the idea is that we need to continue to go beyond notions from the master plan to indicate the many of the other strengths of the CSU that are not fully understood. For example, some people think that there's not research done in the CSU, and all of us know that that could not be further from the truth, but somehow that is not a widely understood factor. Very often people think our focus is on teaching only. Also, in terms of saying yes, that this speaks to internal and external audiences, we say that we demonstrate to stakeholders how we are preparing students for academic and personal success, and we produce the majority of the workforce in many key industries in California. That's how we speak to internal and external audiences. Then in terms of what would the message points on this touchstone be? And here we went fairly global. And again, this is the touchstone on quality. And what we say is that the CSU has quality, i.e. informed and engaged people, trustees, executives, faculty, and staff who manage and utilize fiscal, physical, and human resources that transform the lives of students, families, communities, and our state. And of course, the specifics and the priorities in that regard will differ by campus. Thank you.
Chancellor.
I'd like to ask a question to question was important in the answer. You alluded to the misperceptions embedded in the master plan that cut across the three public sectors of higher education. Did your group have any insights in how to reframe that conversation about that there are differences across the three sectors, but it's not who's best and who's worst? That's the wrong conversation. It's how synergistically we serve California and the nation's future. How do we go about reframing that conversation?
I think that one of the ways we go about reframing that conversation is what you have been doing with the president of the UC and the chancellor of the community college system in meeting with our various boards, governing boards, and looking at and talking about the relationships that you've developed and the things that are happening in the state as a result of that. How significant this issue is, it's going to vary. And let me just refer to Trustee Fagan, for whom this was a particular area of focus.
Thank you. Basically, we were talking about it also needing a possibly significant, I'm not one to suggest committees be formed, usually, but Garrett's people are expert in this, and working with you and some of the other top staff, I think could sit down to first figure out what the problem is, and second of all, what concerns need to be addressed, and then third, how they'd be addressed. So I don't think the specifics can be done here because it's a complicated half-century problem that has grown up. And you don't solve that overnight or at a meeting like this. So, but maybe it's there's all sorts of different ways to go about it. But the concern that some of the presidents have expressed, and we all, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I remember that, the UC system takes 12.5% from the top, and CSU 30% or 33 or whatever. So by definition in the master plan, you're sort of considering that as going down the scale a little bit, and therefore maybe not at the same level as the UC. So as you said, Tim, they're different and synergistic one's not necessarily better than the other one. But how do we get that across? Because if we can get that across, I think good things happen. Good things are already obviously happening, and we're doing a great job, and there's a lot of quality, and the trick is to help people realize what the reality is. And, you know, one of the president of Long Beach State here was telling me, you know, and I think she reflects what a lot of people have had experience, that, well, they couldn't get their kid into UCLA or UC somewhere, so they'll go to CSU. That's not the kind of thing that we want to see happen, because once they get here, they say, wow, this really is great, and this really isn't second, and this really is terrific. So I think it would benefit everybody in the state to realize just what the quality is here, and that takes a real effort that is complex and not going to be solved here today, but really essential to start looking at it in a real way.
Thank you. Eduardo?
Mind if I just make a comment?
Please, excuse me for reaching.
I think the fundamental problem is we tend to equate the quality or the level of preparation of our students with the quality of the institution. In fact, those are not the same thing at all. Nobody would want to say that the medical staff at a preemie ward is inferior to the ones that handle the babies that are born at a timely basis and are very healthy and basically take care of themselves. On the contrary, I think that preparing students that come with challenges actually requires greater resources and greater skills. So I think if we're able to separate out the student body looks like with what the quality of the task at hand and the people and the resources that we're marshaling for it, we would be a lot better. And I think that the focus on learning outcomes rather than the inputs can help us at that.
Thank you. And so who's talking about access and affordability as a touchstone? Lupe.
Thank you. Okay. So interesting conversation. I think when we started off with access and affordability, we kind of went to this place of, is it a touchstone? And we ended up with the answer of, we don't think it's a touchstone. So we're challenging the fact that we started there. And what we feel again is that it's I know we're being difficult, but for good reason. We see access and affordability as a means to transformation of students, communities, and in the reason we we talked about access specifically in terms of access to an inclusive opportunity to be prepared to go into college. We also talked about access to courses, to quality, to faculty, financial aid. There's a lot of different things that access represents, but at the end of the day, it is a means to achieve what we think is actually the touchstone. And I know it's a lot of words, but it's transformation of students and communities. And it's consistent to what we've been hearing from all the other tables in terms of what is it? And when we think about purpose, what are we here to do? This is definitely something we think is a touchstone. And then when we started talking deeply about affordability, and we had conversations about what does it mean, and does that make us, a value player, and then what does that represent? And that's not really what we feel we want to represent, although we want to provide a reasonably affordable education. But we started thinking about it a little differently, and we went to this place of looking at affordability based on what's the revenue? How do we fund this? We talked about sufficient state investment, moderate student investment, philanthropy, public-private partnerships, and of course CSU bending the cost curve. And we think that through these means, we will enable access to the People's University. So we get back to the core principle of, we feel that we have to be a gateway. We have to, we are here and charged with creating an educated citizenry. And in order to do that, we feel, though, that it's a shared responsibility and accountability. So that's another key message for us as we think about what this means to the end actually requires. So again, our key messages were moving away from treating this as a touchstone and looking at its true effect, which is the means, and also by having this shared responsibility over the affordability, the access as a means, we feel our third message point is that graduates solve degree drought, completions requires the access and affordability. So we kind of took a different look at it. Anything else from my colleagues here at the table? Did I miss anything or any other emphasis? No? Questions? Good?
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, our next touchstone, maybe, maybe not, is student learning and success.
We'll cut to suspense right up front. We do believe it's a touchstone. An easy one, right? We renamed it a bit. We said student learning and success, which was consistent with our before break endeavor. And why is it important? Trustee Fortune's group covered a lot of these and very similar. It's part of our mission, California's future. And then another one of our touchstones is advancing economic development and quality of life in the communities we serve. So that all of these, you can read them, things we've talked about already. Affordability, yeah, sure. After advancing communities, sustaining democracy, creativity and engagement, and then ROI, return on investment. And maybe I like the phrase, the People's University. We're California's university. And so we do provide an ROI. And then here simply is students in the workforce. As Trustee Taylor mentioned several times, jobs. That's what we're about. Affordability and access and inclusivity and diversity. All important. That's why. How do we get there? Well, one is the faculty and staff success. That's key to drive student success. That's how much we pay them. It's also the number that we have, whether it's a faculty, staff, the ability to do research, let alone teach the classes. And again, the way we go about research is it drives student learning, not research for research's sake. And again, that's a very important point. And then it's infrastructure, technology, physical, people. And then we had a bit of discussion about data. We have programs around the CSU in data science and business analytics, but we have to have a level of business analytics so we can make decisions sooner than waiting 6 or 8 months after something's already happened. So that's really key for us. And then institutional barriers. Trustee Brewer was really key. She mentioned that in a larger group earlier. Students don't see these barriers, and they're there. And so we need to do a better job of moving those. And then advising is critical, whether it's a student that's a commuting student or in the residence hall. Intrusive advising, this gets at the achievement gap, and not all campuses have achievement gaps, Monterey Bay being one that doesn't, and high tech and high touch. We also talked about research and then creating learning communities on how do we get there. We kept going, again, important aspect of cost and accessibility, financial aid programs, scholarships, and grants. That brings in the private philanthropy, also can be driven by revenue from public-private partnerships. And we also had a bit of discussion about beyond just intuitive and intelligent career counseling, but making sure that our faculty are there with, the departments are there with career paths, because not always every career path ends up that job. That also connects back to this point, making sure that we have enough people so they have time to be mentors versus just simply in the classroom. Questions 3 and 4, yes. Our point. I think remind me of question 3. With the caveat that it must be responsive and flexible to student needs. And it speaks to our internal and external audiences quite loudly. We spent a bit of time and ran out of time and could spend even, I think this is an important point, message points. But CSU has driven and will continue to drive the economy. That's very, very clear. An investment in the CSU is an investment in the future of California. An investment in California's university is an investment in the future of California. Table, good group effort. Anything to add?
Thank you very much. And the last of the topics that we're talking about under the category of touchstones is diversity. And the speaker for this group is Diane.
It is. So we didn't debate whether this was a touchstone. We assumed that everyone would agree that it is for us. Why is diversity important? Because of the changing demographics, not only of the state of California, but increasingly from virtually every state in the United States is changing, and we think California is ahead in that regard. It's important because we have to recognize that while Monterey Bay may be an exception for us, there are still large achievement gaps that exist on some of our campuses, so we have to pay attention to that. We think that by having greater diversity or having a diverse student population as well as faculty, that we can affect more effective student learning, that the preparation of our students for this new economy, for the global economy, for the diverse workplaces that they will find themselves in. We talked about what is diversity with respect to, there are numbers of elements or layers of diversity, whether we're talking about gender, ethnicity, race, income, sexual orientation. I think someone mentioned religion. There's many different layers of diversity. We also talked about, speaking of different layers, that we do have students who come in with a great diversity in terms of their preparation. And so that's another aspect that we mentioned. We want to make sure that we are sustaining democracy and that our students have an increased understanding and appreciation of differences, and that comes easier by way of having a diverse student population and as well as faculty and staff. We have what falls underneath diversity. It affects faculty. We want to make sure that we're not just talking about our student population, but our faculty and staff that needs to reflect our student population. It affects the kind of curriculum, or should affect the kind of curriculum that a student is exposed to. It also would affect the kind of, we hope, pedagogy, so that faculty are teaching in ways that the current student population can grasp and relate to. We talked about the international students and how they too are adding to diversity, as well as someone mentioned that even sometimes out-of-state students can add to our diversity. And the example, I'm sorry, I raised was a student from Alabama coming to Northridge would in fact be exposed to a tremendous amount of diversity that they wouldn't get elsewhere. Should it include all campuses? Absolutely. But we also acknowledge that it may differ by region. If your particular service area is very diverse versus a different one, or if you have a different mission, as for example with the Maritime, and it's a huge urgent issue for them to attract more women and underrepresented students, but it's a huge challenge as well. And then on the fourth question, which was, does this speak to internal and external audiences? We didn't simply answer yes. We were going to tell you how it speaks to internal and external audiences, and we believe that, again, because of the diversity of California, we are preparing the future workforce for the state, for employers who want to hire more diverse employees, and so on. We believe that learning is enhanced by having a diverse educational setting, including, again, not only students, but faculty and staff. As a system, we are among the most diverse, if not the most diverse, in the country. We provide a richer experience than anywhere else. And finally, on message points, very much related to how we message this internally and externally, CSU is elevating all boats through our diverse student population and preparation of students for degrees. We help diverse students succeed, even though we know there's more work to do there, back to the achievement gap. Part of the solution to income inequality, which both parties are now actually talking about, both Democrats and Republicans are talking about economic inequality. And given our student population and so many first generation and low income, we are contributing to lessening that income inequality. So that's another message we might use. We believe education is the equalizer. It is what brings people up to not just income, but other kinds of equal opportunities. And finally, acknowledging we still must continue to address our achievement gap. Did I forget anything, group? One last quote, if you don't mind, from Becky. The benefits of diversity radiate and inure, I can't read that, to all. We'll ask you later what that means.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thanks to all of you who've been providing the summaries for your groups. We are exactly on schedule, which is amazing. And what I would really like, and Lars, I don't know if this is a possibility, is at some point in the future, if we could have a word cloud for this conversation, it would be really interesting to have. I'm not suggesting it, but it would be a really interesting comparison to what we've seen sort of looking back. If it can happen, it would be very interesting. So our schedule right now calls for us to have a break during which Chancellor White and Chair Monville will have an opportunity to process everything you've heard. And lead us forward to talk about alignment, the future, next steps, and as the Chancellor would say, X by Y by Z. So, do you need anything else to think about your summary?
Being a public meeting, I will just say no.
Okay, then, thank you. We'll reconvene at 4:30.
This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly.